Sophie Bennett's hands trembled as she clutched the clipboard, her grip tight enough to crinkle the intake form. The waiting room of Hayes Women's Health Clinic was sleek, modern, tastefully lit with soft jazz humming from hidden speakers. But none of it could calm the storm in her chest. Her heart pounded as she stared at the paperwork. Name, date of birth, medical history, basic things. But her brain felt foggy. She wiped her damp palms on her jeans and tried to focus. Just fill it out. It's routine. You're fine, she told herself. Except she wasn't. Sophie had spent years avoiding this very moment, convincing herself she didn't need to see a gynecologist. But after weeks of discomfort, and a few too many panic-inducing Google searches, she finally gave in. The receptionist had praised Dr. Daniel Hayes as one of the city's top specialists. She'd imagined someone older, serious, clinical. She wasn't prepared for what came next. A nurse stepped into the room holding a folder. "Sophie Bennett?" Sophie nearly jumped. She clutched her form like it was a flotation device and forced herself to stand. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic. Her steps were shaky as the nurse led her into a consultation room. "You can have a seat," the nurse said with a kind smile. "Dr. Hayes will be right in." Sophie nodded and sat, rigidly in the chair, back straight, hands folded. The room was clean and professional. Certificates on the walls, a tidy desk in the corner. But the exam table loomed like something out of a horror film. Be calm. Be normal. Just get through this. The door opened, and all rational thought fled. Her mind. The man who walked in was not the older, gray-haired doctor she had imagined. Dr. Daniel Hayes was young and stunning. Tall, with broad shoulders, warm olive skin, and tousled dark hair. His jawline was sculpted like it belonged in a fashion ad, and his eyes, deep blue and unreadable, locked on hers. "Sophie Bennett," he said, his voice smooth, calm, professional. She tried to respond, but her voice had vanished. All she could do was nod as heat rushed to her cheeks. Daniel offered a reassuring smile as he sat down across from her, flipping open her file. "First time seeing a gynecologist?" Another quick nod. She might have given herself whiplash. He leaned forward slightly, his tone softening. "It's completely normal to feel nervous. Nothing will happen without your comfort and consent. We'll go at your pace." Sophie's throat felt tight. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, or okay, or even please let this floor swallow me. But all she could do was nod again. Her cheeks were burning, Daniel noticed. Not just the flushed cheeks, but the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept fidgeting with her sleeves, avoiding his gaze. Most patients were at ease by now, or at least pretending to be. Sophie was different. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Fine," she said far too quickly to be convincing. He smiled, his laugh low and warm. "You don't have to lie. I'm not that scary." Sophie begged to differ. He was terrifying, but not because he was cold or cruel. He was kind, gentle, and that made it worse. It made her feel seen, and being seen by him, a man who made her heart race just by smiling, was too much. Daniel watched her closely. He'd met thousands of patients, anxious, confident, even flirtatious. But Sophie Bennett, with her quiet voice and trembling hands, stirred something he hadn't felt in a long time. A protective instinct, a strange curiosity. "Focus," he reminded himself. "You're her doctor." He cleared his throat, resetting the moment. "Any questions before we begin?" Sophie had 1,000, but none made it past her lips. She shook her head. Daniel hesitated, then smiled softly. "All right, let's get started." Sophie bolted from the clinic the second it was over. Her heart thundered as she walked the city streets, face still hot with embarrassment. She had never felt so unmoored. Dr. Hayes had been too everything. Too handsome, too confident, too composed. Worst of all, he'd been kind, genuinely kind. She could never go back, not in a million years. But fate had other plans. For 2 weeks, Sophie dodged every call from the clinic. She ignored voicemails about follow-ups and prescriptions. But her symptoms didn't care about her denial. When they worsened, she knew she had no choice. So there she was again, sitting in the same chair, silently praying for a different doctor. Someone older, someone boring, no such luck. When the nurse called her in, it was him again. Dr. Daniel Hayes, looking even better than before, if that was possible. "Sophie," he said, closing her folder with a smile. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." Her breath caught. I wasn't," she lied, eyes fixed on the floor. "You missed your follow-up," he said, voice still easy. "And we couldn't reach you." "I got busy," she murmured. Daniel studied her with quiet patience. She was still nervous, still folding into herself, and he still didn't know why she affected him the way she did. He saw thousands of patients, but Sophie Bennett was unforgettable. The appointment ended and Sophie fled again. But this time, as she disappeared down the hallway, Daniel felt something unexpected, disappointment. He didn't expect to see her again. Not outside the clinic, but a few mornings later he walked into his favorite cafe. And there she was, curled up in a corner seat by the window, a book in her lap, brow furrowed in concentration. She hadn't noticed him. Yet. And for a moment he just watched her, softer, more relaxed than he'd ever seen her in the office. She looked peaceful, real. Suddenly she wasn't just a patient. She was Sophie. He walked over. "Fancy seeing you here," he said, leaning slightly against her table. She looked up, then froze. Their eyes met, then she choked on her coffee. Daniel tried not to laugh. "You okay?" Sophie wiped her mouth, mortified. "Hi," she croaked. He smiled and sat across from her like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I didn't know you came here," he said. "This is my usual spot." "I like the quiet," she mumbled, clutching her cup as if it could shield her from reality. Daniel leaned in slightly, eyes twinkling. "Mind if I join you?" And Sophie, still flushed, still nervous, nodded, just once, because something inside her, small and startled, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the worst thing after all. Maybe this was the beginning of something else. She was nervous. Daniel smiled. "Me too." And just like that, a quiet, easy silence settled between them. For the first time, Sophie really looked at him. The tailored dress shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, an expensive watch, hugged his wrist. Everything about him was effortless, polished, confident, rich. He looked like he belonged to a completely different world. And yet, he was sitting across from her, looking at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. That thought terrified her. A few days later, Sophie's world shifted again. She was scrolling absently through her phone when she saw the article, and froze. Dr. Daniel Hayes, the millionaire behind Hayes Medical Group. Her stomach dropped. She clicked. Each word made her chest tighter. He wasn't just a doctor. He was the doctor. A pioneer in gynecology, multiple hospitals, a mogul in women's health, including the very clinic she had visited. And on top of it all, he was filthy rich. Sophie could barely breathe. It wasn't just his success. It was the fact that she had let herself believe, even for a moment, that he was just a regular guy. But he wasn't. And she? She was just Sophie Bennett, a girl juggling bookstore shifts, rent deadlines, and a life she was still trying to figure out. They weren't equals, not even close. And the sooner she accepted that, the safer she'd be. Daniel noticed the change immediately. At first, he thought he was imagining it. But then Sophie started ignoring his texts. She stopped showing up at the cafe, missed her follow-up appointments. He felt her slipping away before he'd even had the chance to understand what this was. That was unacceptable. So one evening he found her. She had just stepped out of the bookstore, bag slung over her shoulder, exhaustion in her posture. And then he was there, leaning against a sleek black car, arms crossed, eyes steady on her. Her heart jumped. "Daniel!" "Are you avoiding me?" he asked. His voice was calm, but something darker laced the edges. She looked away. "No, I've just been busy." He stepped closer. His voice dropped. "Sophie, don't lie to me." Her fists clenched. "Why does it matter? You're you. I'm me. We're from different worlds. I don't want to be the girl people think is chasing your money." Daniel stared at her, then laughed. Not mocking, not cruel. Just stunned. Her face flushed. "Why are you laughing?" "Because," he said, shaking his head, eyes softening. "You might be the first person in my life to run from me because of my money." She couldn't speak. For the first time, she saw the fatigue in his eyes, the sincerity, the way he looked at her. Not as a doctor, not as a millionaire, but as a man trying to understand her. And suddenly, she wasn't so sure she should keep running. But she did. She avoided the cafe, turned down his invitations, first politely, then with silence. She ignored the texts that made her chest ache, but she couldn't ignore the flutter in her stomach every time his name flashed across her screen. Couldn't stop her eyes from glancing toward the clinic whenever she passed. Couldn't stop hearing his voice when she closed her eyes at night. Daniel Hayes wasn't just someone she could fall for. He was someone she could lose herself in. And that was even scarier than the thought of him walking away. So she ran. But Daniel didn't chase. Not with grand gestures. Not with pleas. He just showed up at the bookstore, where he'd browse idly, chatting casually. At the cafe, where he'd sit in his usual spot like nothing had changed. He didn't push. He just was. And slowly the wall started to crack. One day she laughed at something he said. A real, breathy, unguarded laugh. And in that moment, Daniel saw a flicker of her again. But just when Sophie began to believe this might not be impossible, something happened. She had stayed late at work. Her head throbbed. Her body ached. She hadn't felt well all day but kept pushing through. Just a little fatigue, she told herself. She'd rest once she got home. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, the world tilted. Her vision blurred. Her knees gave out. And then darkness. She woke to the hum of machines and the glow of hospital lights. Everything felt heavy. Her limbs, her breath, her thoughts. But something warm near her made her turn her head. And there he was, Daniel, sitting beside her bed, elbows on his knees, face drawn, eyes hollow with worry. His hair was tousled, his suit jacket hung on the chair. The moment her eyes fluttered, "Open!" He exhaled, a sharp, guttural sound of relief. "Sophie," he whispered, "you scared the hell out of me." Her throat was dry. "What? What happened?" "You collapsed, on the street. A passerby called an ambulance." His jaw tightened. "When I found out, I came as fast as I could." She stared at him. He had dropped everything. For her. And suddenly, the walls she'd built, the reasons she'd used to keep him out, crumbled. But Sophie did what she always did. She pushed back. "You shouldn't be here," she said hoarsely. Daniel frowned. "What?" "You don't have to do this." "Do what?" "This." She gestured weakly. "Taking care of me. Sitting here all night, acting like I matter." He stilled. His face changed. "You think I'm here out of obligation." She looked away. "I don't need your charity." His eyes flashed, not with anger, but something deeper. "This isn't charity, Sophie. This is me caring about you." She laughed, soft, bitter. "Why?" His hands curled at his sides. "What do you mean, why?" "Why me?" she whispered. "You have everything. Success, money, women who do anything to be in my place. So why are you here?" He stared at her, and then, finally, "Because I like you, Sophie." The words fell like stones in water, rippling, echoing. Sophie's heart stopped. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Before she could let herself believe it, fear crept back in. Sophie shook her head, her fingers knotting in the stiff hospital blanket. "No," she whispered, barely holding herself together. "That doesn't make sense." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Why not?" She swallowed hard, her chest tight. "Because," her voice cracked, "you have everything, and I have nothing." Silence fell. His eyes never left hers, and in them, for the first time, Sophie saw something fractured, a flicker of vulnerability, a wound. Maybe she wasn't the only one who was scared. Daniel drew a slow breath, his hands curling into fists, then releasing. For a long moment he just stood there, watching her, searching, breaking. "You think I have everything?" he said at last, voice low and steady. "That my life is perfect? That I've never known what it's like to feel not enough?" Sophie's brows knit. "Isn't it?" He laughed, bitter and short. "No, Sophie, not even close." She stared at him. This wasn't the man she had always seen. Confident, successful, untouchable. This was someone else. Someone real. "I didn't grow up rich," Daniel said quietly. "My parents worked long hours, barely made rent. I got into med school, on scholarships and part-time jobs." Sophie held her breath, watching as he spoke. Not with bravado, but with raw, unfiltered honesty. It made her ache. "When I finally became a doctor, I thought I'd made it. I thought I had everything. And then I met someone." Her heart dropped. "She was beautiful, smart, everything I thought I wanted." His jaw tensed. "And she said she loved me." Sophie could see it coming, and still, her voice trembled when she asked, "What happened?" Daniel's eyes darkened. "She loved my money," he said. "Not me." A sharp breath caught in her throat. "She lied, cheated. I was just a name on her list, a stepping stone." He glanced at Sophie, something unreadable in his expression. Everything she said, every promise, every "I love you," was fake. The pain in his voice sliced through her. "I haven't let anyone in since then," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Told myself I didn't need to, that it was easier that way." Then he looked at her, and the weight of that gaze held her still. "But then I met you." Sophie's heart stopped. The room, the hospital, the past, all of it vanished. Just him. Just her. Just the truth. Daniel. He raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." He stepped closer, then another step. Now he was standing right in front of her, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "I don't care what you have or don't have," he said, his voice stripped bare. "I don't care that you didn't grow up with money. I don't care that you think you're not enough." His fingers brushed hers, tentative, giving her the space to pull away. She didn't. "All I care about," he murmured, "is you." Outside, the city lights glittered against the night, and then he tilted her chin, bringing her eyes to his. "I want you, Sophie. Just you." Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. That night, Sophie lay, awake, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's words echoing like a prayer. "I want you, Sophie. Just you." For so long she had believed she was invisible, ordinary, unworthy of love. But Daniel had chosen her anyway. Could she really believe in that? In him? The days that followed were a whirlwind of hesitation. She didn't call, didn't decide. But deep down she already knew. Because every time she imagined her life without him, it felt hollow, cold, wrong. And that terrified her more than falling ever could. Daniel didn't chase her. He didn't demand answers. He gave her space because he understood her. And he was willing to wait because she was worth it. But Sophie couldn't run forever. When it happened, she didn't think. She just ran through crowded sidewalks, under blinking city lights, heart pounding with every step until she burst into the clinic. She scanned the reception, breathless. And there he was, at the end of the hallway, speaking with a nurse. He turned at the sound of the door, brows lifting in surprise. But before he could say a word, she was already in his arms. No hesitation, no fear. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in her world. His body froze for a heartbeat, then melted into hers. Strong arms wrapped around her, grounding her. She buried her face in his chest, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I'm here." Daniel's breath caught, and in that moment he knew. She had chosen him. They had chosen each other. Sophie never imagined she'd end up here, wrapped in the arms of a man she once thought unreachable, her heart sinking with his. But now, in the stillness of Daniel's office, she knew. This was real. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Daniel became her anchor, her safe place. She still had moments of doubt, moments where that voice crept in, whispering she wasn't enough. But Daniel always silenced it, with quiet gestures, steady love, and the truth that she always had been. 1 year later, he took her back to where it all began, the cafe. She thought nothing of it, until she saw the nervous way he fiddled with his coffee cup, the way he reached for her hand, thumb tracing soft circles against her skin. And then he dropped to one knee, right there, in the middle of the cafe, a velvet box in hand, his eyes filled with love. "Sophie Bennett," he said, voice gentle. "Sure. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. A year ago, she would have run. But now, there was only one answer. Yes. The cafe erupted in cheers. But all Sophie could hear was her own heartbeat, and Daniel's voice echoing through everything. "I want you. Just you." And just like that, their story came full circle. From an unexpected meeting in a doctor's office to a love neither of them had planned for, he once thought he'd never trust again. She once thought she'd never be chosen. But love found them anyway. Not in perfection, but in the quiet persistence of two people who refuse to let each other go. Because in the end, love isn't about being flawless. It's about choosing each other, over and over again. If Sophie and Daniel's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. We bring you emotional, heartfelt tales that linger long after the last word. Tap subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss a moment that moves you. Until next time, keep believing in love, in second chances, and in the magic of the unexpected.